Today I'm going to show you all about Maz Grande on this episode of the Dirthead Shed.
Catch me if you can. My mind, I'm a hungry man. Whoa, catch me when I fall.
So Maz Grande is my pride and joy mini truck. This is a 1990 Mazda B2600i. I built this on dirt every day, actually 3 times. We started out basic with a solid axle swap where we took this ultra cheap Mazda pickup, which ran and drove pretty well, and we put a set of 1-ton axles under it. It's sitting on a Dana 60 in the front that's out of an old Chevy truck, kingpin, low pinion, passenger side drop axle. And that was pretty cool because it is so strong for how small this little engine is and for how light the truck is. So immediately went with like the biggest, beefiest low buck axles I could find. So up front we've got Dana 60. It's got chrome ollie shafts from Motive Gear all through it. It's a 717 ring and pinion. It's got chrome ollie shafts. It's got a, what does it have? It's got a Power Trax grip lock in front, which is kind of like a Detroit locker style locker. That was sort of the basics of the original build under it every day when we did the solid axle swap. It was put huge axles under it as cheap and quick as we could, and it really worked pretty well. Out back we used it's a 1980 Ford F250 axle. It's actually a Dana 70U, and that also has a Detroit locker and 717 gears in it. So right out of the box, it was just like this little tiny truck on giant axles. We put 40-inch tires on it. It was on leaf springs. It was super basic, and it worked pretty good. I mean, for being a $1,500 truck with probably another $2,000 in axles, the thing like dominated. So fast forward that to Ultimate Adventure 2019, I think it was. Maybe it was Ultimate Adventure 2020. I did this cool 3-link front suspension and changed up the steering a little bit. It's got a Scout 2 steering box on it now. The cool thing about that Scout box is that it sits on the outside of the frame, so that when you're doing a link front suspension with that box on the outside of the frame, it makes that drag link a little bit longer, which makes your track bar even longer, which makes you able to get more suspension travel without getting a bunch of bump steer. So that's one of my favorite modifications. I've done that on a few vehicles. This is actually the first one where I left it in stock orientation with the pitman arm going forward rather than flipping it and having the pitman arm go back. That combined with the airbag suspension, it's just like such a cool little setup, and if you look at it, it's actually pretty simple. The thing that's needed most after the first 2 go-arounds was lower gearing. And I had been hauling around parts and pieces for what's in here for like years. If you watch the dirt every day where we built this, it's wild. We took a Toyota R151 transmission out of a 1986 turbo Toyota pickup, which was a basket case. It was just sort of junk. And then I sent it down to Marlin Crawler and they put all these pieces together. So we ended up with a Toyota R151 transmission, which is super low first gear. We ended up with gear-driven Toyota transfer cases behind that. So we've got 2.28 to 1 in the first case and 4.7 to 1 in the second case. So you like multiply all those numbers together and you end up with like a 300 to 1 crawl ratio. That transmission swap has got to be my favorite thing about this truck. It's so cool. If this truck burns to the ground, I'm going to run outside and unbolt the transmission and try and drag it to safety because I like that thing so much. It used to smoke the clutch and the engine was struggling and I was having to drive it way too hard and fast through obstacles, and now it just kind of creepy crawls through it all. So that was build 3. The 4th build on this thing, which I just finished up I think I just finished it up this spring, where we did another episode of Dirt Every Day where Fred and I took this and Clampy 4-wheeling through 4 hardcore trails in Colorado. And I did this crazy rear suspension on it. This has now got rid of the leaf springs and I'm rocking this radical trailing arm suspension. It started out as a kit from Rough Stuff Specialties, and it's designed for a single coilover shock. And I was like, nah, that ain't my style. So I modified it to run airbags on the trailing arms down low. And if you get in there, you'll see it's just like this crazy contraption going on, and it works great. It's the first time I've put trailing arms on a rock crawler and had them in this more traditional fashion with the two lowers with the spring and the shock on them, and then triangulated uppers. So it's a really cool mod. I was able to use parts that were off the shelf and modify them a little bit, but I ended up with this rad product where the thing has like 14 inches of wheel travel in the rear. It rides soft, it gets good traction, it articulates like crazy, and I'm totally stoked on it. The guys from FabTech stepped up and built a set of Dirt Logic shocks for me. I called them up and was like, hey, I want to run the Dirt Logics. I like how they have a stainless steel body. They're pretty cool, but I want this valving in them. And they were able to like bust out this custom shock valving package for me. And the back of this thing is like butter. This thing is so good. In the process of doing that, I shortened the wheelbase a little bit, so we're at 110-inch wheelbase now. And then I also cut 14 inches, something like that. I cut 14 inches off the bed and bobbed that. So the thing is now like this stubby little micro machine, and it looks cool, it works good. I'm totally stoked to be able to drive it. Now it's time just to sort of button up some of these loose ends, like this part right here where the wheel well's missing. Every time I take this truck anywhere, I get two questions. Why a Mazda and why airbags? We'll start with why a Mazda. Well, the Mazda was probably 1/3 of the price of a Toyota to start with, and it was a fuel-injected 4-cylinder compact truck with a full boxed frame. That was kind of my parameters. I wanted fuel injection, and I wanted a powerful little 4-cylinder, and I wanted a fully boxed frame so that when I was doing all these modifications, I had a good platform to start with. That has also become kind of a problem because now I've been chasing electrical gremlins like a computer system that's not working properly. So not to say a Toyota would have been a better one to start with, but if I was smarter and had a few more dollars, I would have bought the Toyota. The next thing was why airbags. This is not common. Airbags on rock crawlers is sort of like, it's a new thing, or it's not a new thing, it's just not a very popular thing. But I've been doing it since 2005 when I built my first Jeep Comanche, and I love it. I'm able to do all the rock crawling I want. I'm able to drive it down the highway. It's a really simple system. You'll see I don't have bump stops. I don't have limit straps. It's just an airbag and a shock, and that controls the suspension. These things are Airlift Dominator 2600. If you're ever looking for a bag like what I'm using here, that's what it is, Airlift Dominator 2600. They collapse to 3 inches, they extend to 12, so you get 9 inches of usable travel, which in this thing is plenty. In the rear, I've manipulated it with that mechanical advantage on the 4-link system, so I'm actually getting like 14 inches of travel instead of 9. So the airbags are kind of wonky and weird to most people, but to me it's normal, and it works really well. I know exactly where to build it. I know how to set it for full bump and full extension, and I'm never messing around with buying a set of springs and hoping the springs are the right size, or buying a set of leaf springs and hoping the arch is right. This is just the way I want it every time. So that's kind of where the airbags come into play. If you get a chance to watch, there's a few videos on YouTube where I went wheeling with Fab Rats in this, and that was my first trip out with airbags on it, and you can really get a chance to see how that new rear suspension worked on that. If you also go over and watch the newest edition of the Clampy and Maz Grande road trip to Colorado, you'll get to see a whole lot of action on how the suspension works, because that ended up being a really long episode and it was all wheeling. This is Maz Grande, and this is a really cool little truck. If you ask my wife, it's a $1,500 truck, and I'm sticking with that.
Whoa, catch me